Good morning, Sooner Nation, and happy Wednesday. I know! A non-live stream video? I'm as shocked as y'all are. What is this? Actual content on a YouTube channel? I know. I know. Mostly, it's just difficult lately to get my thoughts and notes in order on topics, get the computer set up, record, and edit at this current time with so much stuff going on around me in my life versus just setting up, clicking live, and just going on air on a live stream and clicking off without having to do any type of edits. Not to mention that I was at an anime convention all weekend. Sandell won the Luke Rosa Award. Mendoza won the Heisman. Don't care. Want to go talk anime. Want to go have fun at the convention. But it's done now. We can get back to football as the football season is not over yet for OU. Again, you're not here to hear me make excuses, so let's talk some football. A couple nights ago, the SEC revealed the second portion of the 2026 schedule, or what order we'll be playing everyone. And I wanted to give y'all my brief but concise reactions to it. Now, keep in mind that a lot of this is going to be repeat information you've heard before because as we all know, as we already knew who we were facing last year, sorry people who wanted to play Vanderbilt or travel to Arkansas, we've already known since September 23rd of this year what our next opponents are going to be for the next 4 years in conference. We just didn't know in what order we were going to. In addition to playing next year, the other half the following year, and then flipping the schedule for the home and away schedule. I will also say, going into this video, I'm only going to be looking at the very surface level. I have not deep dived into who all is leaving, who's graduating, anything of note from our fellow conference members, and what their schedules look like outside of the very, again, surface level information. This is solely going to be about Oklahoma. In addition, we already knew that UTEP, Michigan, and New Mexico were going to be played on September 5th, September 12th, and September 19th. Since OU announced the Michigan series and the dates back in 2014, I know that's 11 years ago at this point, and the other two back in 2019. We also knew that the SEC is moving to a 9-game conference slate, so we all were curious on how they were going to handle balancing the schedules, which opponents we were going to get, as well as like where the bye week was going to be. So looking at what they revealed, you can tell September 5th, UTEP, September 12th at Michigan, September 19th versus New Mexico. From there, the conference slate begins. September 26th, we are at Georgia. We have our traditional bye week, October 3rd, before a Red River rivalry. October 10th versus Texas. October 17th, we return home and face Kentucky. October 24th, we go back on the road at Mississippi State. October 31st, we return back home for a spooky showdown with South Carolina. Beginning of November, we are back on the road at Florida. Return back November 14th and November 21st for the final two home games of the season against Ole Miss and Texas A&M. And we wrap up the season November 28th next year at Missouri. So, that all said, my kind of instant reaction from this is, compared to the last 2 years, this is a very, very, very manageable schedule. Why couldn't we have gotten this schedule during construction versus one of the better ones? I have no idea, but it is what it is. Again, even with some interesting matchups, you got coaching changes, you got players potentially transferring out, and non-bowl eligible teams you're facing. I also don't think there really is a trap game because you're going to, kind of the identities going in on what these teams are going to be, even if they're look a little bit better than they might or a lot worse. Now, that said, we will have what I term the Notre Dame problem this year, and that we will have our biggest tests very early on, and we need to find a way to at least pass one. In OU fashion, we will most likely need to find a way to beat Texas A&M to be considered for the playoffs, and teams taking one additional L, weakening the strength of the schedule, because, that's how the prophecy always seems to work out for Oklahoma. We won't get the benefit of probably playing playoff teams. I mean, you could say that we have like 33% of playable eligible teams we're playing right now, but Ole Miss won't have Lane Kiffin, and this is also teams that should be in contention every year, like Texas. Additionally, not to mention that our biggest challenges will be on the road. Us being a road team and road warriors will be a huge test next year and a mark on where this team is at very early on. Furthermore, it's still better than whatever people want to say. It's still better than what the Big 12 gave us. But even then, it's extremely lackluster. Nothing on this schedule, at least for the home slate, screams, wow, I have to attend this game. I have to be there in person like the past 2 years. I guess some of the irony behind with getting the gauntlet is you also get the must-see games at home. Now, next up, as concerning for Michigan, speaking of must-see games, for once, when you look at some of our schedule from the past, we actually get the better game of the home and home series versus our opponent getting it. It always seems like we got the rebuild game of our opponent, and then the away game was the better of the two. Games that immediately come to my mind are back in I think it was 2011, 2012, Florida State, the Baker Mayfield game at Tennessee, for example. There are exceptions, sure, like Ohio State, but that did seem the norm for a long time. So it's nice that OU fans actually got treated to one at their house when the team was probably at their best. In general, though, I do wish the schedule was a little bit more spaced out, but beggars can't be choosers, and additionally, you're not going to win all your fights. We lost by having 9 conference games in a row, but again, it could be worse. We could be Florida. Now, again, rare exceptions. Anyone complaining about their schedule being hard, try ours the past 2 years and then circle back to us. I think the SEC did do a okay-ish chance to try to balance everybody's schedule, even if there is some unfair like scheduling. I'll never complain. Back to my points though. I'll never complain about having our games spaced out either. It does seem at times we have had back-to-back home games, and that can be exhausting mentally and on the wall at this point. I am happy that they are spaced out. Though, that said, after our game against New Mexico, we won't be back in Norman for a month. So that we also got the flip side of that as well. Football only comes a couple times a year, but man, it seems like some of it's front loaded and then it's very, very back loaded at this point. One thing I mentioned I will miss though from our schedules is not having the second bye week, as it was nice for once during a football season to just sit back and enjoy just a middle of the break season almost. I know some of it is due to going to 9 conference games and how the calendar just had an extra Saturday. But still, it's nice to have just one of those, hey, I can watch other teams while sitting on my couch at that point. Additionally, mentioned earlier in the season and earlier in this video, this is the worst home slate in years, as many of the teams on it we have faced before, or there's no more excitement to them. Outside of Texas A&M most likely being ranked, again, depending on who all leaves, where they're at by that point at the end of the season, because we'll know who they are. There really isn't a draw for the home slate next year based on what they're also charging. UTEP and New Mexico's are pay-to-win games. Kentucky, I guess, is fine since we haven't played them since 1982. Same thing with New Mexico in 1935, as well as South Carolina on Halloween. We might even get our first one against Ole Miss, and I guess that's fine that we get to witness it in person at our own house for it. But a lot of it's novelty stuff. Again, that's what you can take away from it, but it's a bad slate, especially when the university is raising prices again. It's funny, because I said back several months ago when it was first revealed that this was a horrible slate for this first of 4 years in the SEC, and I got a lot of pushback from that. Now it's gotten even worse, and people are starting to come around and be like, yeah, this is a pretty bad schedule. Now, about the slate itself, let's focus on the slate, though, for this year, or this upcoming year. Road Warriors definitely are the big winners from this, as they get to travel to Athens, Ann Arbor, and Gainesville, meaning they can go on a vacation to Disney World. That also means it's going to be very, very expensive for them having to do that and not having a big time to save up or have time to rest. Not to mention that you get to see their traditions, such as Mississippi State with the cowbells at this point. I'm not going to say it's a gauntlet, though, but only having one bye week is going to wear and tear on this team, and I think that's what is going to define this team is how healthy can they stay through a 9-game for a 8-game SEC gauntlet. UTEP and New Mexico are W's. That's easy. Michigan, despite being on the road, is probable. I don't see right now Underwood staying, despite what the rumors are, and I could be wrong in the future at this point, but I just don't see him staying, and they're going to be rebuilding. Same thing with Kentucky and Florida. Even with the later being in the swamp, as well as Missouri. They haven't done anything, though, that has given me anything under Dirk to fear them. So as long as we walk in prepared, I think OU can take care of business against them. I think Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Mississippi State will be the interesting ones, though. Ole Miss will be based on what coaching staff is retained and who all leaves, as well as what players stick around or transfer out based on the results of the playoff. I think it's probable that we should win. There is expectations we should win, but we are just going to have to play the waiting game and see how that all plays out. South Carolina as well will also be intriguing. Their quarterback will be a redshirt junior and has every intention of returning. And unlike this year where they were just plagued with injuries, they should be a much better unit. I think it's going to be competitive and not a game that OU should overlook in October. Finally, Mississippi State is also going to be interesting as Levy has really improved, and to give him credit, has really worked on that program, and you just can't walk in expecting a W in years past. Focusing on the rest of the slate, though, the much tougher part of it, we get to face Georgia, and it's there, similar to Florida at Athens. Going to Georgia and getting a W when it's the first time we've ever visited Athens, as well as opening up the 2026 conference slate for them at home, for us on the road, being the first team on their gauntlet as they get Vandy, Bama, and Auburn. After that, as well as maybe even facing the national champions, it's a tall order to ask. We also know that most likely, for sure, this will be a college game day lock, and they're going to roll out the red carpet. This type of game is what the network signed up for when OU and Texas moved to the SEC, and what the fans also really want. Despite what anybody says about we want to keep the traditions, they want helmet matchups, this is what people want to see. Could be an easy top 5, top 10 matchup very early on in the season. OU was a forerunner in scheduling these big non-conference games, but now that it's moving even deeper into conference play, as we're also moving away from this in the bowl season. My thoughts though is I think if we had them later in the season, as well as the key personnel we have now on defense versus graduating or going to the draft, I think we could catch them off guard. I think we're just a bit too early though on the season for it, even with it taking time that Georgia takes time to meld and mesh as a unit. For now, I'm penciling this one in as an L, again, on the surface. Anything can change from team turnover to injuries. Next up with Texas. Right now, for me, Texas is an L until Brent can actually score points there. I have more faith in Brent right now based on keeping the team motivated and getting them to where they are at going into a playoff game against Alabama. But it's still Bizarro, Lincoln Riley, and you still got to get a W there at some point. And I haven't had any indication that the offense is fixed just yet to be able to pull out a W in Dallas at this point. Even with the wacky shenanigans that OU Texas has and having the bye week before that. Because guess what? Texas has the bye week too. Right now, so that's 2 L's right now. With both of those games, though, we will immediately know where OU is at. Hence why I circle back around to Texas A&M from earlier. Texas A&M should be a W because by at that point we should know what Texas A&M is and be in the middle of the pack against their gauntlet too, because they get Texas the following week, which is a very rough back-to-back. Again, we will know what Texas A&M is and whether that will be a quality win or not. But it will be tough regardless since Reed will be coming back. So where am I getting with that? The general takeaway is there is 3 games we should win, 4 to 6-ish games we are expected to win, so long as we take care of business, even if they range on how tough they are, and of course the top games. The overall expectations, though, going into next season, again, it's very surface level, is the bar should be at least set competing for the SEC Conference Championship and playing for the game. And getting into the playoff if the offense can find and discover what the forward pass is, essentially. Discover what any type of offense is. This team could easily be a 10-2 team again going into SEC Championship so long as certain things fall into place. But even then, we may not want to play in it just to give us a week of rest. You know what I mean? Like having that 8-game stretch, we may just want to skip it. This may be, again, and the reason why I say with the SEC Championship, this may be the closest team having a good schedule to make a deep natty run since probably 2017, especially since you're catching several teams in a first-year rebuild. Could we also be the first team to win the SEC since they added expansion teams? They could. The schedule does favor OU to at least make it to Atlanta at this point. Again, though, our success is going to boil down to how healthy we remain. I don't think the travel will be too insane, as outside of Michigan, the travel to the rest of the schools is very manageable too, and the defense does travel. However, how healthy can we stay? How can we minimize bumps and bruises at this point? I think that will be the defining feature, kind of like OU 2000. That will be the defining mark on how successful this team will be next year. Last part is kind of like questions going into next year. Looking at the schedule, will we get a night conference game? We got night games at home for sure this year, but we never actually got a single night conference game. And looking at a lot of these seem like, unless we get the option to be on ESPN Plus, the SEC Network, where OU gets more say to dictate the kickoff time, as well as potentially what A&M is by the time they're in Norman. All of these kickoffs scream rooster kicks at this point, at least at home. So, ladies and gentlemen, you should be prepared to be tailgating at 11 a.m. and have your breakfast menu already planned out. But again, at this point, the only things we'll be waiting on going forward, as the SEC sure loves to milk this information, is the kickoff times, which we will not get till later next year at this point. But that's all I got, guys. That's next year's content. That's for next year and off-season content to fill. I will post a subsequent video here in the next couple of days about my initial thoughts, on the rest of the SEC schedule, and point out little bits and pieces that I see on other people's schedules at this point. But that's all I got to talk about the SEC schedule. What is y'all's thoughts on who we're facing next year? Do you think what our record will be? I want to hear from y'all, so be sure to comment, rate, subscribe, like, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live and or I upload a video. In the description as well, if any of y'all watch the live streams, I will also have a link to my Extra Life profile where you can donate any amount of money to the Children's Hospital. Again, I participate as an Extra Life participant, but I'm just the middleman. All funds go directly to the Oklahoma Children's Hospital. And especially around this time of year where the holidays are even harder this year, every dollar amounts for those families. But that all said, guys, we're going to wrap up here. I'm going to get back to practicing going feral, as I will be at the playoff game this Friday, and we have to have all of our attention and all of our energy put towards beating Bama again. So Boomer Sooner, there's only one, and I'll catch all of y'all on the next video.